and welcome to our masterclass today, which is the last in our series of 3 masterclasses covering the topics of cybersecurity, compliance, and AI. As always, I'd like to start on behalf of Nostra by thanking everybody for joining us again today. So over this series of masterclasses, we've looked at advancements in technology and how they can really help us, but we've also looked at how they have to be used in a responsible way. Today, we're going to take a deeper dive into the world of AI, how it has evolved and how it's being used in business and industry today. We'll look at how to prepare your business for AI and how to implement it safely. We look at how compliance plays a part and how we use security practices to keep your data safe whilst using AI. As always, we have a top panel of experts presenting. And today we have our principal solutions architect, Senan Finucane. We have our head of modern workplace, Jaco Kruger. We have our head of compliance, Jason Burns. And we have our chief technology officer, Gary Melvin. Our advice, as always, is to please listen to what the experts are saying and look at the recommendations that they're making. These sessions are best when interactive. So please, any questions that you have, as always, post them in the chat and we will handle them for you. There will also be a couple of questions coming your way during the session, as always, so please be ready for that. And we will leave time at the end of the session specifically for Q&A. We will be recording the sessions and we will send on the recordings and slides to attendees after each session. For now, I'd like to welcome you again, and I'd like to hand over to our principal solutions architect, Senan Finucane, who's going to kick us off today.
Thanks, Gary. Good afternoon, everyone, and have a very happy Christmas. Today, we're going to take a look at AI and the revolution in productivity. So I'm going to give you a brief background in where all of this began in the roots of the internet and where it's all going to enter the AI in the future and to voiceless agents and beyond. So to start with, every business is at one of these 3 stages in their technology adoption journey. So if you're quite behind the curve, you may still have domain controllers on-prem, file servers, group policy, and we would class that as a legacy use customer. Then if you've already done somewhat of a digital transformation, you would be at the middle there at cloud first. So you'd probably have all your laptops joined to Intune. You would have the likes of Nostra Cloud Shield, and you'd be leveraging the best of what comes with Business Premium, SharePoint, Teams. And the next step that everybody needs to be looking at then is really becoming an AI first company. So that's fully cloud first as per above, but mature AI adoption and security in place. So that's using the full gamut of Microsoft Purview for data classification and security, but again, using the most that you can get out of your 365 Copilot license. So just to start off with a tiny bit of a history lesson. So the internet really started in the mid-90s, around 1995, and then it gained rapid adoption over the next 5 years, right up until the year 2000. That's when you had the dot-com bubble burst. Mobile adoption started around 2007 when the iPhone came out. Then we were hit with the 2008 recession. Then we had the pandemic. And now we're at the precipice of, I suppose you could call it the AI revolution. So if history has taught us anything, it's that disruptive technologies arrive, they change the rules of business, and they separate the winners from those left behind. So again, from the internet right up until what we have now with the AI, revolution, these disruptions weren't gentle nudges, they were seismic shifts. And I really believe, and Nostra believes, that AI is this next wave. So disruption is coming, and it's going to be faster and bigger than before. So the timeline really for business impact, I'm trying to kind of set the scene and give a little bit of context using previous seismic shifts in technology that have happened back in the day. So we're going to rewind right back now to 2006 when LinkedIn reached 5 million members. Facebook was launched back in 2004, but really came into its own in 2006. And Twitter, which is now known as X, was launched in 2006 as well. So during these periods, many executives dismissed social media as trivial or for kids. Most self-respecting businesses didn't see it as a serious marketing channel. They often mocked or ignored it as well. But then the turning point came in 2010, 2012, when there was billions of eyes on these social media channels. Businesses began to realize social media's potential. Brands started investing seriously in Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, and LinkedIn. And the first wave of social media driven business success stories were beginning to appear. So roll on a little bit more. So what's happening right now? Today, social media giants like Mr. Beast with his food brand Feastables is on track to generate $550 million in revenue in 2025. So it just shows you the power of it as a media channel. Hailey Bieber has recently sold her beauty brand Rode to Elf Beauty for a deal valued up to $1 billion. So that's huge. And Hailey Bieber, for those you don't know, is Justin Bieber's wife. She basically built this company purely from her following. I think it's called a minimalist makeup move. Basically, that's how she did it. But from 0 to 1 billion is some achievement. So phase one, if we equate that to the agentic move, so AI may feel like a toy. Most businesses are experimenting. The question is, are you even paying attention? So we're in phase one now, and I'm trying to equate it to back in the day, back to 2006. We're in that first 5-year period from 2022, which I believe will somewhat pitot out around 2027. And then phase two, which is the all important one, where this will really separate the winners and the losers, will go from 2027 to beyond. I hear I've just given it also a 5-year period, but AI is with us for the long term, definitely for the rest of our lifetimes anyway. So as the statement there, AI will become avoidable, just like social media. And it really will separate those winners from the losers, basically, when it comes to business. So that's why early adoption is absolutely critical. I tried to use the sponge cake analogy here. I like this one because it kind of explains exactly what AI does for your business. So think of AI as the sponge in a cake. On its own, it's bland. It just has raw potential. But your input as the person using the AI finalizes that 20%. So that's your secret sauce. So the filling, the icing, your unique vision is the 20% that turns it into the finished product. The other 80% is done by the AI, which is the sponge. So you can see when you add obviously the 80 and the 20, you get a total product then, or total output at the end. So you focus on where your vision and human judgment adds the most value. AI doesn't replace your endeavors, it amplifies them. So it's like your digital assistant sitting on your shoulder, enabling you to do more with less. So if a particular presentation or a product launch or a marketing package took you 8 hours previously, with AI used correctly, and I stress that used correctly, you have to invest a bit of time in understanding how AI should be used for each particular different application as well. But if you were to use it, it can save you hours and hours. So again, it doesn't replace you, it just amplifies your output. Next, I guess we're trying to equate this also to the lockdown moment. So we've all been here before. We all remember the pandemic. We all had to change our businesses in this blink of an eye, basically. So a lot of business had to pivot to online or risk collapse. That was a shock that accelerated digital adoption. So this is the same thing. AI is a bit of a shock to the system. We're not sure what to do with it, but we know we should do something with it. So businesses that adopt early will be positioned to win, and those that ignore it will risk serious disadvantage. And I really agree with this statement as well, because you can't adopt AI overnight. So there'll come a tipping point when you'll regret basically that you hadn't invested in your AI journey earlier, because it'll take too much time to play catch up, and it will be next to near impossible to catch your competitors once they have a 2-year head start on you, because there's so much preparatory work that needs to take place with the likes of SharePoint, with training, with changing the company's culture. So I guess it's really a decision that you need to make now. And again, if we go back to those 5-year periods, I think we're coming towards the end of phase one, 26, 27. You still have time. It's not like you're behind the curve. The vast majority of SMBs have not deployed 365 Copilot, but quite a few are starting to establish small pockets or centers of excellence within their organization as well. And that's what I'd highly recommend you guys do in the new year. So that should be your, I suppose, call to action in Q1 of 2026 to talk to Nostra and establish that Copilot Center of Excellence within your business. All it involves is maybe 5 users within the organization that are somewhat tech savvy and have an appetite to learn and a hunger to learn this new technology. They will then be the evangelist within your own business that can spread the good word of AI to everybody else when they become familiar and adapt with the new technology. Next, we're on to what I believe is going to be an absolute seismic shift to businesses. It's all in relation to entity AI. So it's basically treating your company's data as an entity and treating your company as an entity. So imagine the future, business as a single intelligent AI entity, a version of your company you can talk to where all systems and data are seamlessly connected. At the moment, most businesses are, I suppose, siloed, fragmented data sets. So a lot of your information may be in your ERP system. It may be in your CRM system. It may be in your financial package. It may be in your marketing system. It may be in your HR system. But I guess what I'm trying to articulate is they're all disconnected. They're not natively connected. So if I go and interrogate the data in one app, it has no correlation to the other apps. So it's very difficult to get a macro view of the business and understand holistically where the businesses are at, what decisions I need to make, and what actions I need to take, or what course of action I need to change. So imagine being able to ask it, or the AI proactively providing these insights without even asking it, which is even better. Which customers are at risk of churning this quarter? How is our current inventory aligning with projected demand? Which regions are outperforming or underperforming in sales? Which marketing activities are driving the current spike in sales? What emerging trends or competitor moves should we be aware of? What are our followers saying about us on socials this month? So you can take a temperature check just to see. This will be the future of AI, where a platform will have all of this data at your fingertips, basically. So instantly, you as a business leader can gain insights and analysis, no waiting on reports from the executive team or the SLT. Your AI is connected to the systems and data, giving you a real-time understanding of your business. It's a bit like back in the day, I was a bit of a fan, I don't know if you guys were, of Star Trek. So it's a bit like Jean-Luc Picard on the board of the Star Trek Enterprise, talking to the bridge, the big computer that was in front of you, and being able to ask any question. So adjust course, change warp speed, or even scan a nearby planet for life forms or resources. I know that's a bit far-fetched, but I think you get my analogy. You'll be able to speak to your business as if it's a living, breathing human thing, an entity. So next we go to, and just to add, that's a little bit away, but I guess what I'm trying to say is if you start the 365 journey now, they'll only be coming out with this stuff in the next 3 to 5 years, and you'll be perfectly positioned to adopt it all. So again, early adoption is critical. So AI is coming fast and hard. The companies that adopt early will have the advantage, just as social media early adopters did as well. It'll give you that first mover's advantage. So start experimenting, like I said, integrate AI into your core business processes and think of it as an extension of your executive team. So I believe early adoption isn't optional, it's survival, growth, and a path to competitive advantage as well. So Microsoft 365 Copilot is the most natural way for you and your businesses to segue into AI, because the vast majority of you guys are Microsoft centric or are based on the 365 platform. So like I said, it's a very, very easy path to go when it comes to AI. But the first step of that is engaging with Nostra, making sure, if we go back to the 3 different stages of companies where you had legacy use, cloud first, and then AI first, if you're still in that legacy AI bucket, i.e. you're still using X Drive, Y drives, and you haven't migrated to SharePoint, that's the very first step you need to take. You need to take the plunge and move into SharePoint so that you can adopt all these new technologies. And just to point out, if you're not already aware, if you're still using SMB file shares like X drives and Y drives, you can't natively take advantage of 365 Copilot for work. You'll only be able to take advantage of the web-based version, which is akin to the free ChatGPT. But you will gain far better advantage if you can take control of the work and the web versions of Copilot as well. So just to reiterate that. These are just a few metrics from Microsoft. They recently did a study over the last 12 months from companies who have adopted Copilot. So basically, there's been an 18% increase in productivity, 5 hours time saved per month per user who had a 365 Copilot license, 17% cost reduction, and 85% user adoption rate. It's a little bit like, I suppose, learning a new example. When we're all, say, over in France or Spain on holidays and we feel a bit overwhelmed if we're trying to practice the lingo and we're in a bakery or a bar or whatever, you just have to dive in and do as best you can at the start. Everyone has that light bulb moment when 365 clicks and the penny drops with them. And from that point on, they massively accelerate to a different level. I kind of tend to call people who have AI skills next generation employees, because they're the ones that are going to be most sought after in the workplace. Because they're going to be so much more productive. As you can see, they're 18% more productive. But again, that's just a Microsoft study. I think it's going to be far more than that. If you're able to leverage AI in the workplace much more effectively than your colleague, you're always going to be the one that's going to be favored for different tasks within the business. So that's important to note as well. So again, I guess it's a skill well worth investing in. So look, just to finish off on the final words and providing a bit of context, like I said, an intro to AI. So remember, the first 5 years, it's a bit of a toy. Everybody's getting used to it. They don't know really what to do with it. There's no real tangible wins from it. But the next 5 years, it's going to be the absolute growth engine within your business. And I really mean this. You cannot be left behind with this technology. You need to start investing in it now. And if I was to give you any one takeaway from my presentation over the last 10, 15 minutes, it's to maybe buy 2, 3, 5, 365 Copilot licenses. For those of you that don't know, they've actually recently lowered in price. They used to be €30 per user per month. They're now roughly €20 per user per month. So it's a great time to invest in 365 Copilot licenses. Only buy a few licenses, create that center of excellence, engage with Nostra, go on that journey, and then we'll reassess after 6 and 12 months to absolutely guarantee that was worth your while doing it. I guarantee you won't regret it as well. So I'm going to hand you over now to Jaco Kruger, and he's going to take you through his presentation. Thanks very much. You're on mute there, Jaco.
Sorry. Thanks for that, Senan. Just to comment on what Senan was saying is the Copilot for SMB license. So if you have less than 300 users in your organization, that license is €20. And if you did not know, there was a Copilot for sales and there was a Copilot for security. Those separate SKUs have fallen away. That's all been put inside of your Copilot license. So with the one Copilot license that you purchase, you actually get Copilot for security and Copilot for sales included in that. And it's really interesting when you start using it, you will see things like an agent popping up in your Copilot where you can ask it things like, how many licensed users do I have in my organization? Look for users with this type of license, this type of permissions, and Copilot will actually look at your organization and come back and give you answers around that. Now, there are obviously many types of AIs out there. Even in the Microsoft world, you have Copilot, you have Azure AI Foundry, and for us, we believe that Copilot for M365 is the ideal working partner for you if you are already in the Microsoft sphere. The reason for that is it does have access to all of your content. Now, if you look at the slide that I'm sharing, this is an example of how Copilot for M365 interacts with your data. On the left-hand side is the tools and the apps that have got full integration. There are actually quite a few more that have got partial integration, but these ones have got full integration. And what they do is they, via the Microsoft Graph, they can access your mailbox, that's either your mailbox or a shared mailbox or delegated access mailbox that you have access to, your Microsoft Teams data, that's your chats and your channels, and your shared chats that you are in, your OneDrive, and any SharePoint sites that you have at least read access to. It accesses that via the Microsoft Graph, and it will also use the large language model, which is similar to what something like ChatGPT is using. The difference between that is when ChatGPT uses the large language model, it takes your query and it writes it back to ChatGPT to update their model. Microsoft will never write back to that model, meaning that your data is always protected and it is never using your data to train outside of your service boundaries. and whether you get the Copilot for M365 full license, which is the integration into all the apps, or whether you use the free license in your environment that you get because you have bought a Microsoft product, which is the same as ChatGPT, your data is still protected within your environment, and Microsoft does not train itself on your data at all, which is really important to remember. Now, when we look at a Copilot rollout process, there's obviously some things that we put in place to make sure that your environment is secure before we roll out Copilot to everyone. The reason we do that is in many environments, people have been given access to everyone in the organization to certain sites just in case you might need access, or even by accident. And the last thing we want is a scenario where somebody sitting on the help desk accidentally finds the CIO's payslip, or somebody finds an confidential document inside of your organization because they were accidentally given access to content. So we start the process off with security hardening. We report on your current state of your environment. We do a workshop with you to identify the changes that needs to be made, and then the changes are made to permissions and to tenant level settings around your environment. As an optional, we always suggest sensitivity labeling, especially if you are in any form of regulated industry. Sensitivity labeling is really important. What that does is we can allocate sensitivity labels to certain SharePoint sites, or auto-allocate it to certain content like any PII or sensitive information. And what Copilot will do is it will just submit itself to any DLP policy that has been put in place to say you are not allowed to train yourself on it. Now, how would that look in practice? Say, for instance, I've got my human resources site and I have put a sensitivity label of highly confidential on that human resources site, and my DLP policy says anything that is highly confidential, Copilot is not allowed to train itself on it. Even if Senan has full access to the HR site, if he goes into his Copilot for M365 and he starts asking questions around Gary and information around Gary from the HR site, the HR site is actually going to come back and say, I cannot answer that for you. I do not have information available for you. Not that Copilot cannot find the content, but Copilot is just saying we see there's a sensitivity label in place, which means we will not actually show you this content. Even if you're a site owner, even if you're a site collection admin, even if you're a global admin in the environment, Copilot will not go past those boundaries. Then,
Jaco, sorry, I'm going to use that time. So we got a question in there from Jared Joyce. Jared, thanks a million for the question. I think it's relevant, Jaco, to what you're talking about at the moment. If I use Copilot, will my customer and company data leave our organization? No. I think yes, and I'm not happy about it. Can one keep the information within the organization and still make use of Copilot?
Yes, definitely. So what it is, let me quickly jump back to the previous slide. You see this Microsoft 365 service boundary. What that means is the moment you buy your first Copilot license, Microsoft spins up a hidden Azure blob inside of your tenant that's owned by your organization, and every single query that is done is stored inside this blob. It does not take your data to train anything outside of your organization, so it will not train ChatGPT, it will not train its own models, it will not allow anybody to see that. It goes so far to say that if I run a query, the query with the results is just available to me. So Gary will not even see the queries that I'm busy running or the results that I'm seeing unless I go and share that query with him. Something really important to note is if you have guests in your environment, guest users in your environment, and they have their own Copilot licenses, they will not even be able to query the content, even if they have full control on the content. It will not allow somebody outside your organization to query your content using Copilot, even if they have access to that content. And Microsoft is very strict about that. Now, one of the new things that Microsoft have brought in place is a license called SharePoint Pro. Now, SharePoint Pro used to be a separate license. It's actually something that you get now for free the moment you have one Copilot license in your environment. Now, what is it? There's a lot of functionality around SharePoint Pro, like knowledge management, where I can auto-populate columns and so forth. But the piece of the functionality that's really important for us here is you can there's a button where I can say restrict content from Copilot, and what it's not saying nothing on this site can be read by Copilot. It's saying if you have not opened a file from this site in the past 30 days, that file will not show up in your Copilot results. Now, why is that important? If we are busy going through the process of looking at your environment and there are users that have already had Copilot licenses, we could actually lock down certain sites with highly confidential information until we can get to the point where we can make sure that the permissions are correct. So unless somebody's actually worked on that file in the past 30 days, Copilot will not give them the results on it. And we can turn that off again for that site once that site is locked down. Then we can restrict access to a site to certain security groups, which is really important. For those of you that have seen logical barriers before, it's like logical barriers, but now it's on a site level, which means, for instance, if I have a board of directors, I can have a security group for board of directors, and in the background I say only people in this security group is allowed to be added to the site. So even if Gary as a board member has full access to the site, if he shares content to that site to somebody that is outside of that security group, Microsoft will strip that permissions out from it immediately. And if the person clicks on the link and it opens up, it will not show them access denied. It'll actually show them an error saying, yes, you do have access to this content, but it has been blocked by a policy. Please contact the organization to discuss this. So another great way to make sure that content is protected. And then you do get, like I mentioned, the advanced knowledge management. There's quite a bit of functionality around that. Even things like if you are using Adobe Sign, it integrates Adobe Sign with your SharePoint environment, where your Adobe file doesn't have to leave your environment. It does all of it as part of a process flow, and it's free. But yeah, that's just something else. Your question, Michael, does Nostra have access to an organization's data? Not at all. We only have access to our own data. Even Pax8, who's our licensing provider that sits closer to Microsoft than us, they don't even have access to your data. Microsoft won't have access to your data unless you give them access to it. It is a very controlled environment, locked down environment. Then the last thing that we look at is shadow AI. Now, why do we look at shadow AI? If you don't block shadow AI in your environment, you can be most definite that there are people using Grok, ChatGPT, and other AI tools because it is available to them. Now, those tools will most definitely take the data that you've given them, the files that you've given them, and train their own licensing model, their own LLMs on it, which means that if you are putting it in those shadow AI tools, somebody querying information around your environment might actually find those files. So we're trying to block the shadow AI as fast as possible. And over and above the AI tools, I don't know if you know this, but for every tenant that gets spun up, Microsoft makes about 2,900 Teams apps available in your tenant, and Microsoft by default leaves all of them unblocked and all of them available to everyone. And I did a quick query this morning where they are thinking about roughly 40% of those 2,900 apps have got AI embedded in it, which means 40% of those 2,900 apps have got some other large language model that they're querying and that they could potentially be training on your data if your users are using these Teams apps. So it is really important to look at what apps are inside of your environment, to look at blocking any apps that should not be used by end users, and to make sure that something is available to an end user. If an end user needs an app to transcribe a meeting, you give him Facilitator because that's part of the Copilot license for free. If a user needs an app to be able to do a Kanban board, you give them the app for that. So make sure that the end users have what they need by giving them apps that are just secure and safe, and blocking everything else in your environment as part of dealing with the shadow AI inside your environment. Now, lastly, from my side, big picture of this readiness framework, we identify, look at data sources, and we look at the risks in your environment, do the full assessment, and of course we keep in mind GDPR and ISO standards. We look at the governance, which Jason will be touching on straight after this, inside your environment. We make sure we look at the performance, and we can continuously look at the security. Who is using AI? What are they using it for? We cannot see the queries they're running, but we can see, are they what type of environments are they trying to access with AI. And at the end of the day, our role is just to enable you to use AI without us actually becoming a hindrance in the process, because we want you to use AI because it is most definitely going to be beneficial to your organization. If there are no other questions, I am going to pop right over to Jason.
Thank you very much, Jakob. So I know there's no further questions there, so I'll move on. So on the compliance side, I'll start off by saying that we've looked in the previous masterclasses around what are the frameworks we could use in order to help get us to compliance, and having AI as part of that journey in there, and where compliance would sit and the responsibility of it would sit within the organization. Today I want to do a little bit of a sum up around that and look to see what are the benefits to the business of really getting proactive in your compliance journey with AI or any other area, because what I've seen over the last 10 years is we've really changed as an economy from a situation where it was occasional policies might be seen to now really, much like Senan was saying, if you're not there with AI, you're going to be left behind. In the same vein, if you're not there with what we'll ostensibly call compliance, you may not be taken seriously. You may not be in there in the tender process. You may wonder, why am I not winning this business? Because there's very much a trickle down from areas of the economy where these are required. And with the supply chain management that is coming in under a number of the new legislations, if you don't have the requisite items in there, you may not be considered. So it's shifting from a restriction to a driver within the business. So we put in place processes around it such that we can really kick on and make best use of it. So as Jakob was saying, one of the reasons you need to go on that journey is to make sure you protect yourself and your data. So that's a very simple first step. And then the next element is to position yourself for success, whether it's success internally with your processes and your procedures, or success when you're out there with your customers. So you want to build confidence with either your internal stakeholders or the people you meet out there in the market. And if you can demonstrate that you're adhering to those regulations, you'll be seen as a leader by comparison to the other companies that aren't showing that level of compliance in it. Now, just to check, are the slides moving forward there? I'm seeing a little bit of disruption on my side.
I don't see them moving forward here.
No, just take control.
Okay, so. Okay.
There you go.
So yes, so that's what I was just discussing there. And moving forward now, we need to balance that in innovation that we're going through in the rest of the business with responsibility to ourselves, our shareholders, our owners, our colleagues, our members, depending on what sort of an organization you're in there. So you want to make sure that within your structure, as you implement items, that you put in checkpoints to make sure that, yes, we're doing this right. For example, right now at the moment, have we trained everyone in our organization around AI and the considerations with it? If we're using generative AI, are we flagging that we're using generative AI in it? Have we considered, are we using AI that might have bias built into it or similar? The elements of the AI Act that we should know will be considering this year. If we're doing that consideration, we want to make sure it's fit for purpose. So, agile is a little bit of a buzzword, but I like to consider it of, do things happen quickly, and can we change if we need to? Well, look, let's not lock ourselves down if something isn't working. Let's change that. Let's make it work for ourselves. And as we're doing that, we'll get that innovation culture going, because there's nothing breeds more innovation than if we succeed on the previous step, and can we move quickly, and do we keep people's enthusiasm kept up to a high level. And then with all of that kind of responsible innovation, we're building sustainability into the brands, we're protecting our brands, and we're meeting our customer expectations. So now, what have we discussed previously? The regulatory environment, we need to make sure we adhere to that. That gives us that flag to our prospective customers that we're doing it well. So we make sure that our deployments meet the regulatory requirements. We make sure that if we're using AI, we're transparent about it. If we detect this bias in there, we make sure that we address that. The important thing with AI at a very simple level, and many of you may have discovered this as you test AI or work at AI, it needs a sanity check until both you get used to it and it gets used to you. So the first couple of times you use your queries and so on, you may say, where on earth was it pulling that from? And you begin to develop a language on how you talk to it, or a process on how you talk with it and interact with it. And it might take you only a week, it might take you a month, it might take you 2 months, but once you get to that point where you've addressed what are the elements of it that you need to influence so that it matches your expectations or your customers' expectations or the business requirements. And then, as Jaco was saying, we need to protect our data. We need to make sure that the data protection policies are fully adhered to, and the GDPR. When I was talking earlier about being proactive with your compliance journey, the GDPR is a great example of that. If you don't do anything about GDPR, your business will still keep working. Every day the invoices will come in, the invoices will go out, and hopefully the money is coming in. On the other hand, if you suddenly have a data breach and you don't have all the requirements under the GDPR, it is very much you are on the back foot, you are dealing with the Data Protection Commission, you're maybe generating documents or you're trying to get them up to date. Whereas if you're proactive with it, well then the questions suddenly become much less intrusive. You have all the evidence, you've been doing what you've said you'll be doing, you're considered to be a trustworthy organization. So what does that look like? A quick recap on it. Well, the EU AI Act has obviously kicked in this year. We have our GDPR. We have NIS2 for a wider area of the economy, which strengthens security requirements in there. We have DORA in the financial sector, looking to withstand disruptions. And then we have the new ISOs, the new ISO, which is specifically around AI governance. So that has 39 controls which you can use to integrate it into your organization to help protect and demonstrate governance. So as I'm leading to here now, where does that give you your competitive edge? So if you can show that you're not only meeting or exceeding the regulations, you build that trust with the customers, the investors, the regulators, and you really strengthen your market position. Since I started on this journey myself many years ago, I have seen where that there's a lot of work potentially involved here, but almost like when you've sown your first seed and you get the first apple from the tree, when you get to that point where maybe it's very simple with me, where I can tick a box that says I have a SOC, or I have this certification, or I have my ISO, and all the other questions magically disappear. It's a little bit of magic, and that workload has now paid off. Or the tender you're going for, you now have you're now prime position in that because you've met the requirements in it. Your enhanced brand reputation. In my business experience, nothing is better than a referral from somebody else. So if you're operating in an industry and you're known for being someone who meets or exceeds anything, whether it's performance, regulation, or interactions with customers, it's known and it's broadcast, and the business will come in much easier. It's easier to win business by word of mouth than it is by advertising. So let's build that brand confidence out there. Then you get to your market expansion opportunities. So if you have all those, you can move laterally within your industry and expand into another market because you already have those building blocks to get you there. And then finally, what I started with was you protect yourself. You reduce the risk both for yourselves, but now with the supply chain management, if you can display that you've also reduced the risk for something further along the supply chain, there you are. That's another competitive edge for you. So where does that all build to? It builds building trust. We display transparency, and we have resilience in our business. So what do we look to do? We look to put in our structures around AI, and we look to embed them into our projects effectively. We look to make sure that we display accurately what we do and how we do it. And then as Jaco was demonstrating earlier, when you look at where AI and the Copilot especially can integrate into your organization, it allows you to extract that information that you may have had the rights to see, you may have known about last year, but you've forgotten about. But yet when you ask that query, rather than you sitting there for a half an hour trying to find that email or that folder, it's there to you in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, depending on how you phrase the query around it. And then finally, around the governance phase, it's the monitoring and auditing. You must put in a process that shows that you're maintaining the systems you're putting in place. You show that, yes, here we are, we can show that we are doing all the things we say we do, and that it's measurable. So where does that give us? What does that give us in our market sphere, or otherwise it gives us leadership in that sphere? Like I was describing there, the power of word of mouth. So we're seen to be setting standards. We're seen to be influencing the industry. We're attracting the top talent. I was interviewing only today, and one of the prime questions back from the interviewee was around where we are on our AI journey. And then aligning with corporate social responsibility. Depending on the sector that you're dealing with, that can be either very high or very low, but by its very definition, to be effective with your corporate social responsibility is a positive element. So then what do we look like if we haven't started our AI journey and we're looking at it from a compliance perspective? So I would say integrate compliance into your innovation strategy. I would say start the first steps around what is an assessment of the business. What do we have? What does it look like? What do we want to do? And have we put in risk management around any of that? Ideally, to simplify your life rather than reinventing the wheel, look to align it with a standard in some shape or form. As I mentioned, there's a specific ISO. There's the ISO 27001, which will ask you to check that you are in compliance with regulations, etc. And there's NIST 2, which is an agnostic cybersecurity framework. All very positive, all very useful. And that will help you derive those compliance benefits. So that as you continue along your AI journey, but that it's all positive both for yourself, your colleagues, and your customers. So I'd like to thank you all, take a moment now to thank you all for joining any of the webinars that I've been involved with over the year, and wish you a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Jason, thanks a million, and we're going to hand over to Gary Melvin in a second, but I just want to remind people, any questions that people have, please throw them into the chat, please throw them into the Q&A, and we'll handle them for you. Jason, thanks again, and Gar, over to yourself.
Thanks, Gary. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap up on some of the items that we covered today, and then we'll open the floor for some questions. So one of the things around AI is that we can't cover AI without talking about security, and not all AI is equal. So we've got, and I think Jared asked a question about uh, data leaving the organization. So there's AI we can control, and the AI then that we can't. And shadow AI, to Jako's point, is a big piece of the puzzle. So for most organizations that we work with, they're looking at Copilot, and then they're also locking down the organization to restrict other AI or shadow AI in the organization. And we can do that in multiple ways. So security is probably the first consideration in the AI journey. We do this through a product offering called Cloud Shield and Nostra, which is based on your Office 365 Business Premium license or your E5 licensing, using Defender for Endpoint, using Intune, and then turning on Zero Trust. So next year, 2026, you're going to hear a lot around Zero Trust from Nostra. And essentially that is, if your machine is not in Intune and is not compliant and up to date, then it can't get access to your data. Taking that a little bit further, then once we have the right user coming in with the right machine, we want to make sure that access to the data is key, because if the user has access to the data, then Copilot will also have access to the data. So we're doing AI readiness assessment to make sure that the data permissions is in line with best practice, role-based access control tied down to groups, departmental configurations, and then also moving that forward next year will be a lot of work on data classifications and data loss prevention. So this is where we can take your data, we can apply sensitivity levels to data, we can restrict data, what is allowed go outside the organization, what is allowed being printed, what is internal only, what is public based facing data. So that's something that we're going to bring into 2026, and you'll hear more from Jason in terms of that. That may require some additional licensing, but in terms of data classification, we can start off small with a business premium license. If we want to do more in terms of doing full site-based data classification, we look at maybe a pure view suite on top of the data, on top of the business premium license. Shadow AI is an item to watch. Some of the newer solutions from Microsoft will allow you to only allow Copilot and block other shadow AI. And that's something that's to consider as well. And these are part of new licensing bundles from Microsoft. And it's something we'll send on some details. I know both Senan and Jaco mentioned it, but there is new licensing bundles adding new functionality for the small to medium business users. So we have the business premium license. Now we have a range of suites. We have a bundle of Intra ID suite, which was more protection for people working from home in terms of internet access, blocking shadow AI, also for VPN. And then we have a pure view suite, which is all about security and preventing data loss from the organization. So any insider threats. But that's probably the second stage, is actually looking at all of that. So there is a good bit there. The great news is Microsoft is making this relatively available to the small business user, which is only new and it's only coming out in December. There's also bundles of 10 Copilot licenses at a lower cost than individually. So that's something we'll send on details after this as well. So shadow AI, ChatGPT is probably the bigger one that we see data going up onto. Leakage of sensitive data through AI queries. So we have seen instances where organizations have lost proprietary or really sensitive data by uploading to ChatGPT and other shadow AIs. So not all AI is the same. Copilot can be limited just in your internal usage, and it natively integrates with all your Microsoft toolset, and that's pretty much where we see AI going over the next year or two. And without governance, AI becomes an invisible risk multiplier. So we have to actually structure your tenants, and we have to give AI for most users as well, because this is, I know about 3 or 4 years ago, we were having a conversation with giving access to users for mobile phone usage, because before 3G, 4G came out, mobile phones were being attached to corporate wireless, which we didn't want. But in order for it to stop it, we were to make sure we give it an alternative. So the alternative we see it is we give users access and train on Copilot, and then we block everything else. So we give them one hand, take away in the other, and then make sure we're training and we're getting benefits. And one of the things about AI, and this is for Yakko in the new year, AI and automation work together. So AI and Power Automate and using the data to move it across the organization, using AI to make decisions is a game changer. So finishing up legacy use, moving from servers, and we still have customers that are using servers on-prem, small to medium customers we see moving to fully cloud, using all the functionality in Office 365. So that's Intra ID, Defender for Endpoint, Intune, and then moving that up the stack of that into Copilot and then leveraging Pure View. And that's the Microsoft Compliance Suite to get insights into where your data is being shared to, how it's being shared, what data is leaving the organization. Huge amount of wealth of information can be got there. And then using Copilot to drive meaningful change across the organization as well. And finding those business processes. Every organization is different. So the challenge for you guys is to find a couple of areas in the business where you can automate, use AI actually to save time, create efficiencies, and become more lean in 2026. I'm going to hand back to Gary Byrne before we kick into questions. And again, same as Jason, it's been a pleasure all year doing the webinars, and happy Christmas to everybody if we're not talking to them before the new year.
Gary, thanks so much for that. And also Yakko, Jason, and Senan. Listen, we really, really appreciate it. Remind people, if anybody has any questions, please throw them into the Q&A and we will deal with them for you. But I'd like to maybe Senan start with yourself, first of all, as first presenter. I was thinking as you were talking about, adoption and, people getting left behind. And I was remembering when Microsoft Azure came out, over, a number of years ago, there was a lot of money spent on Azure licensing at the time, but there was very few applications for it. Whereas right now, Azure is commonplace. It's everywhere, But when we look at the AI, the buzz around AI is huge. You know what I mean? So what have you seen in the last year to 2 years in how people are taking on, how people are looking at it, and how people are adopting it?
Yeah, basically, like I said, you need to, I suppose the first moves are start with a small cohort within the business, get 3 to 5 licenses, establish your center of, I suppose, excellence. That's what Microsoft like to call it. Especially work with Nostra. So reach out to your account manager, reach out to Nostra. We can then put a plan in place and work with you guys then to put all the proprietary work in place. So you need to get all of your data into SharePoint first. You need to then secure it all. So it's all down to data classifications and permissions and security, DLP. Once you've all that done, we can then work with you guys to unearth the use cases within your business. So where we can find time savers, basically. So if it's in the marketing department, the finance, or wherever, we will go in and provide training, and we will work with you desk side to unearth those opportunities, I guess, to increase your productivity or your employees' productivity desk side. And then finally, we'll then provide ongoing training at different cadence or touch points, maybe 6 months, 12 months, or when you need see fit that you need help with it, we can then provide that. And we won't leave you just to kind of wallow in the whole AI world. We'll hold your hand through it. We're trying to establish a community amongst our customers with AI as well, where that we can all cross-pollinate ideas when it comes to AI. Because at the end of the day, AI is so new. Nostra doesn't know everything. But if we leverage the collective hive mind from all of our clients and from all the employees in within Nostra as well, and by the way, we're all using it ourselves. We've took the decision to deploy a license to everybody within Nostra, much like larger organizations, because we fully believe in the technology. And I think that's something you need to do too. But again, start with that small cohort, 3 to 5 licenses, reach out to your account manager, and we'll take you on that journey and we'll hold your hand on that journey, because it's not easy. It's like trying to find your way of a forest sometimes with all this 365 stuff. And myself and Yakko and Jason and Gary are finding new features, new use cases, literally on a daily basis. So again, it can be daunting at the start, but it's well worth taking your first steps on that journey.
Absolutely, Shannon. I think, and the point with the Azure is that, even though at the time, it actually took a while to get up and running, but now it's just say, listen, it's everywhere. The buzz that we're seeing around AI, absolutely in the last 12 months to 24 months is off the scale. We're constantly getting businesses coming to us saying we're interested in this. How can we get started with this and how can we bring it in? So, Senan, thanks so much for that. Moving Jaco on to yourself then, I suppose one of the things maybe to build on what Senan has just said is, how can customers get their co-pilot readiness process kicked off? So you talked about co-pilot readiness. What's the next thing that they can do in relation to that?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Definitely the first step would be to speak to your account manager. Your account manager would then set up a call with either myself or somebody in my team where we can talk you through what are the steps to get your environment co-pilot ready. And it would start with assessing your environment. And we normally in parallel say, if there are one or two users in your organization that have access to everything anyways, like a CIO or a CEO, we would give them co-pilot licenses to start off with, even while we are in parallel securing your environment. And then we take the process from there.
Jaco, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Jason, moving on to the area of compliance. So look, where do we start when we're considering AI and compliance? What's the next thing that we should do?
Well, the first thing to do is to really identify the shadow AI. I think that's the critical thing for me. It's not so much do I need to subscribe to a framework or anything similar, because the fundamental of compliance or governance is it's best practice. And what's the first thing to do? We need to see what is happening in our organization. And there was a question earlier about, if I use Copilot, will that go outside my organization? The key is if you're using the M365 Copilot, no, it is going to stay in there. So it's a case of, all right, well, I need to put in place a policy that says these are what we are allowed to use, because that will protect us. But we also need to follow that up with, we need to see what are people actually using. So do we have a method by which we can stop people doing it, or we have advised them, and how can we enforce that? So as I say, you start with, what do we have at the moment? What shouldn't we have anymore? And let's stay within the tram lines of where we need to be in order to keep our data and our people safe.
Jason, thanks so much for that. And Gary, I had a question for yourself, but I think the one that came in from Liam, and I know you're answering it there on chat, but we do have a number of financial organizations on the call as well, and this is a real world example. So what we're getting asked is that the situation of where we might have board members in an organization having access to email or data on their mobile phones. This is looking like it's going to be a problem going forward. So how do we help manage those situations?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that comes up quite a bit, and probably came up a couple of times even this week. So what we believe is, in order to keep the data secure, and it depends on the type of data these board members are accessing, but in order to keep the data secure, we have to keep control of the data. So that means managing the device and not letting that data out of our control. So what we see for board members, committee members, is sometimes they're transient inside an organization. They're only there for a couple of years, and they could be working on stuff and access to stuff that we want to keep in the organization. So ideally giving them a device, making sure that device is secure, and keeping all the data in the 365 platform. So giving them a mailbox. We have to make it easy for them. So the device needs to be usable like a small Surface device. But I think to secure the data, we have to keep hold of the data. So giving them a small device, keeping it in 365, giving SharePoint sites for committees working on stuff. And that means that the data is not flowing out into a Gmail email box, and that the work they do is being able to hand over to somebody else when somebody else comes in and takes that position as a board member. So there's a bit to go through. There is no right or wrong answer, but there is implications on the different decisions. Microsoft has just released a new element as well for pushing data out through the Edge browser for unmanaged devices, so people can actually only access it in the browser, and it has to be a managed Edge browser. They can't access unless that access through Edge, and then they can't download it. So they can look at a Word document, but they can't download it. So there is ways around it. But what we want to do is to prevent downloading sensitive documents onto unmanaged devices, because what we've seen, and I just told it in the chat, is that we have seen data move outside the control of organizations and get back into the chat GPTs of this world, or end up on the internet, sensitive data. So just trying to keep control of that data. But happy to have a conversation, Liam, on that at any point in time.
And Gary, thanks so much for that. And Liam, thanks also for the question, and for everybody who asked questions today. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I think the message today is this, and this AI thing is not going away. You know, it's gaining momentum. It's commonplace. It does need to be controlled, and it does need to be managed. And what I would say from a Nostra perspective, we've lots of experience in the areas. So I would encourage anybody on the call today to reach out to your Nostra account manager and to open up a conversation around compliance and around AI. If you don't have a Nostra account manager, then please, you can actually reach out to info@nostra.ie, and we'll get emails into there. My own email address is gary.byrne@nostra.ie. You can email me directly, and I'm happy to get the conversation kicked off as well. Masterclass will be available on our YouTube channel as always, and we will follow up by sending slides and the access link after the session. So listen, thanks one and all for attending this masterclass, and indeed the other series of masterclasses. We will be back in January, and we'll be setting the scene for more webinars throughout the year, because these topics are only getting bigger and bigger. So it only remains to say to all our customers, have a fantastic, happy Christmas, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Everyone.